Democrats wouldn't put statehood in their platform. We bugged them and we bugged them and we bugged them about it, and they just didn't do it. So what I did, was I rented 2 gigantic billboards outside the convention center, and they went up and they carried this message. Stand up for democracy, stand up for DC statehood. And we did one in front of the convention center and one down the street that said, to form a more perfect union, make DC a state. You know, the Constitution starts out, we the people of the United States in order to form a more perfect union. So we did these t-shirts, we did 100 or so, to commemorate the fact that we had done this and to make people aware that we were pushing the statehood message. There were 20 of them left, so I brought them. I'll let you guys have them.
Oh, man.
They have the
so
dates
much.
and the time from the convention on them. And let me tell you that I appreciate very, very much the work that you guys are doing. I saw the videos you made on your cell phones. I thought they were really interesting. I was particularly taken by the woman who knew about statehood but wasn't sure what side she was on. Because this is a major problem for us. People in the District of Columbia that even know about this issue are really not sure how it affects their lives, so they don't know how they feel about it. And we have to get the word out and let people know that this affects all of us. We lose $2 billion a year, $2 billion a year, because we're not a state. If we had that $2 billion, it'd be easier for you guys to get a decent education. We could pay for every graduating senior in the District of Columbia to go for 4 years of college to any college they wanted in the world and still have money left over. So it affects us all. It affects our education. It affects our health care. You know, the District of Columbia, some of the records that we hold were the highest incidence of new AIDS cases of any city in America. We have the highest incidence of breast cancer, highest incidence of type 2 diabetes. We could work on all these things if we had that $2 billion. Not to mention that you would actually have senators that could vote and representatives that could vote. Now, I don't know what you want me to do here, whether you want me to go over what statehood is for the district, or whether you guys want to just ask me questions, because I know you have a lot of, you probably have a lot of questions because you've been working on it. Yes, sir.
How you doing? My name is Pastor Evans. I'm a young entrepreneur here in
Yeah.
Atlanta. And my first question is, I wanted to ask you, what made you be a shadow senator for the Washington, D.C.?
Because I was a young entrepreneur, and I started a business, and I had it for 25 years, and I made a lot of money at it. And I thought to myself, you know what? I want to do something. What are my kids going to say about me when they talk to their kids? What'd your dad do? Well, my dad made money. Well, that's all well and good. But I wanted to contribute something. I didn't go to school. I grew up poor. I didn't go to school and get a good education so that I could make money. I got into politics originally 35 years ago so I could make the world a better place. And when I saw this issue, I said, how stupid is this? We live in the capital of the greatest democracy on the face of the planet, and the people in this city have no voice. This is just crazy. So I decided, since I made my money in the world of campaign politics, I decided I would campaign for something. And I ran for this office. And I found out that there was a man running against me who was very well known. And I said to my wife, don't worry, I'm not going to get elected. I don't have a chance. This guy's going to just have me for lunch. And I got 85% of the vote. So that's where it started. And I just got reelected in November with 82% of the vote. So I'm not as popular as I used to be. Okay. Yes, sir.
What's the basic qualifications
Well, it's fun. That's a great question. And some of the qualifications, because the title is United States Senator. Some of the qualifications are exactly what they are to become a senator in any state. So the basic qualifications are the same. You must be 30 years old. You must be an American citizen. You must be a resident of the District of Columbia and have lived here, I think, for, I'm not sure what the time limit is, but it's a year or 18 months prior to your election. But other than that, those are the only qualifications. And that's really the only qualification that you have for being a senator in any state. Because when they formed the country, the idea was the power was in the hands of the voter. You know, Thomas Jefferson said that governments derive their legitimate power from the consent of the governed. So the idea was it really should be up to you to decide what the qualifications for senator are, beyond the basic qualifications of age, American citizenship, et cetera, et cetera. But as soon as you're 18 and you're considered an elector in the District of Columbia, that means you're registered to vote, you could run for shadow representative. Because members of Congress only have to be 18 years old, but senators have to be 30. The upper house, I guess the belief was that you need a little more experience to be in the upper house. Yes, sir.
My name is Jake.
Yeah.
I heard you say that you pitched this idea to the Democrats.
Yes.
Right? Is statehood a bipartisan idea? Would you pitch it to the Republican Party as well?
Yes, but unfortunately, we've only gotten support pretty much traditionally from Democrats. And the reason for that is that we are the most democratic jurisdiction in America. We've never once voted for a Republican for president in the District of Columbia. We have no elected Republicans in the district. Not one member of the city council is a Republican. Never had a Republican mayor. Never had a Republican. We're Democrats, Democrats, Democrats. Obama got a higher percentage of the vote in Washington, D.C. by far than he got in his home state of Illinois. He got like 90% of the vote. So that's what the Republicans resent. They don't want two Democratic senators forever and a Democratic member of the House forever. But this has always been the argument. And it's funny that when Hawaii and Alaska came into the Union, people said Alaska can't be a state because they're all Democrats, and Hawaii can't be a state because they're all Republicans. Well, I can't remember the last time, actually Alaska elected a Democrat in the last 6 years ago, a guy named Begich to the Senate. But before that, they hadn't elected a Democrat for years. And the same with Hawaii. They hadn't elected a Republican in years. So these things change over time, but that's always been an argument. And right now, Puerto Rico has a statehood bill in it, and they're trying to become a state too. And a lot of people think that we should come in together because they're more Republican than the Democrats, than the district, rather. You know, so you come in with a Republican and a Democratic state. This also was tried in a thing called the D.C. Voting Rights Act. We tried to get one vote in the House. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but when they did that, they tried to pair up with Utah because Utah is the most Republican state in the country. They only have one Democrat in all state politics in Utah. So, but that didn't work. And this is all based on the Missouri Compromise, which if you haven't studied it in school, you will. But that's how slave states and non-slave states were entered into the Union. Around the time of the Civil War, when slavery was the issue, they wouldn't let a non-slave state come in unless it came in with a state that had slavery. So Kansas didn't have slavery, Missouri did, and they came in together. It's called the Missouri Compromise, and they've been doing things like that ever since. So there's that mentality that we should find a bunch of Republicans to hook up with and come in together. Yes, sir. I think you had a question. Oh, ma'am. Yeah.
My name is T.U.M.O, and I'm just wondering, why, since I'm a teenager, I don't know why should we care about this?
Because you should have the same rights that everybody else has. And when you Like I said, you're losing $2 billion a year, and it affects your education and those opportunities that are available to you. You know that if you go to a college, and it's a public college in another state, you get up to $10,000 tuition assistance in the District of Columbia. And that's because we have no university system in the District of Columbia. So that's one reason you should care. Another reason you should care is because you don't have a voice in national politics. Your grandmother, if she lived in the District of Columbia, couldn't even vote for president. We didn't have the right to vote for president until I was 11 years old. That's the first time the District of Columbia ever voted for president of the United States. So Lyndon Johnson was the first man that we ever elected in the District of Columbia. So that's another reason. It's undemocratic. Doesn't it bother you that everybody in America has a senator and a congressman that can vote and you guys don't? I mean, it's just crazy. And there's no place in the world where this exists except the District of Columbia. It used to exist also in the country of South Africa, but it doesn't exist in South Africa anymore. So that's another thing. Our civil rights is running behind South Africa. I think that says something about our country and some of the things that need to be done. And you know, the jurisdiction that you guys live in and what the rules are make all the difference. Let me ask you guys a question. Do you think what happened to Trayvon Martin would have happened everywhere in this country? Or do you think some of it had to do with the fact that he was in Florida, which is a very conservative state with very conservative laws that allows people that are not police officers to walk around the streets with guns? I think you're safer in Washington, D.C. as a teenager than you would be in Florida.
And I think it had a lot to do with that, with being conservative. I think it was a lot of racial issues going on with that also.
Yeah. And you know what? The big thing about, look, I grew up in the most racially divided city in America. I grew up in Newark, New Jersey. And when I was a kid, we had the worst riots, the worst race riots. I lived in a city that was 60% African American, and I never had an African American teacher, never saw an African American policeman or a fireman or any city worker. If you were black and you weren't picking up trash, you didn't work for the city. And that caused such a terrible, terrible problem in North New Jersey that we had terrible riots and the city fell apart. And part of that is just based on ignorance. The fact that my city was totally segregated. White people and black people didn't mix. They never got to know each other. So all the myths that they had about each other, there was no way the way you find out the truth is you go out and see what's really out there. And in New York, we were afraid of black people as children, and black people were afraid of white people. Yes.
How did you feel about the verdict?
About the verdict in Trayvon Martin? I think that what happened, I have two feelings about it. One is, I'm not sure the jury really had much of a choice given the way the law is written in Florida, and I think that's a problem. But I think that this man, who obviously profiled this young man and followed him and was told by the police to back off and didn't, should be punished for what he did. I mean, was it first-degree murder? I don't know. Was it second-degree murder, which is what he was charged with? I don't know. But he certainly went after that young man, and that young man didn't attack him. He had an iced tea in one hand and a bag of Skittles in the other. He had no reason to be attacking a man with a gun. It was the other way around. I think it's pretty obvious that this guy was the aggressor.
Do you think it was racially? Like, do you think he was
Yeah, I think he was I think he was afraid. I think he was afraid of this guy. I think if the kid had been white, he would have been less afraid. I think, and when the man stands up and says, I don't hate black people, maybe he really believes that he doesn't hate black people. He has black plans in him. But he certainly has misconceptions about him, and I think that's really the problem with racism, I was lucky enough to have a dad that thought didn't think much of the world in general, but he pretty much thought that people were people, you know, that there were good people and bad people, and they came in every sex, race, religion, you know, ethnic origin, and that's the way we were brought up. And you know, that's what we went into the world expecting to find, and that's what we found. I think this guy went out expecting to find trouble in Trayvon Martin, confronted Trayvon Martin, and found just what he was looking for. And then he freaked out and overreacted. So I think that's what happened. But there should be some punishment for killing a child with a bag of candy in his hand. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I was watching the TV on the lady she was Europe, and the stuff that she was saying was really, you know, offensive to me. Like, the man was like, so how do you feel about Trayvon Martin? She was like, I feel bad for both of them. But then after a little while, she just said that she feel bad for Trayvon. She didn't say that she feels bad for Trayvon Martin in general, because it was not that was ceased. She really had something that she had feelings more about the murder than the victim.
Well, let me tell you a rule about politics, because one thing that I've been really good at in life is political campaigning. And the last election, I got 207,000 votes. And the most powerful thing you can say to people on the campaign trail is, I'm like you. So because people empathize with people that are like them. So, for example, if I'm a veteran, I don't go out in the public and in a group without saying I'm a veteran, because I know that if there are other veterans in the group, they'll connect to me. I'm a father. I say that all the time, because there are parents in the group and they say, well, this man knows what it's like to raise children. So I think what you're seeing there, young lady, is a woman that empathizes with somebody that she sees that's like her, but she doesn't empathize with as much with Trayvon because she can't relate to Trayvon. And that's part of the problem with racism. When you have all these misconceptions about people, then they play into everything you feel about people because you can't relate to them.
Do you think it was a speedy and fair trial? Do you think a speedy and fair trial?
Well, I think he was judged by a jury of his peers, and I think President Obama has said this. He said, I think President Obama, his first comments were, this is a tragedy, surely is a tragedy, a child died. But this is time for reflection. We are a nation of laws, and the jury has decided, and the jury has decided. Yeah.
So, as a shadow senator, not a senator, what is your job in Congress as a shadow senator?
Well, my job is to come out and talk to people like you and get you all fired up so you get out there and make us a state. The office was created in 1796, so it's really, really old. And it was created in Tennessee. Tennessee, a group which then I believe was called the Southwest Territory, they decided they wanted to become a state. Well, one of the criticisms that they had from people that didn't want to become a state was, well, they didn't know how to be a state. They never had a legislature. What would they do? How would they go about it? So they elected you guys and they called them senators. And they sent them to Washington. They knocked on the door of the Senate. The Senate didn't know what to do with them. They let them in, let them sit on the floor, let them watch, and they lobbied to make Tennessee a state, and it worked. So since then, 5 other states have done the same thing. California had shadow senators, Oregon had shadow senators, Michigan had shadow senators, Minnesota had shadow senators, Alaska had shadow senators, and the job of these people has always been to make their jurisdiction a state. So that's my job. My job is to make DC a state.
So, do you only talk to teams, or do you also go out?
No, I bother everybody I can bother. I got an hour-long radio talk show on the internet on Sundays. I bother everybody in the world about this. And I go to Congress all the time and lobby and knock on the door. I call myself the Blanche Dubois of politics. And Blanche Dubois is a character from a famous book called Streetcar Named Desire, a famous play called Streetcar Named Desire, and she says, I always get by on the kindness of strangers. And that's what I do. A lot of people recognize me as being elected by the people of the district, and they respect that. But they're not required to do anything. They give me things as a courtesy. They let me speak. They give me a forum. They let me attend meetings, give testimony, things like that. So I do everything I can think of, from putting up billboards to coming to talk to you, to having a radio show. I've traveled all around the country talking about this issue. I protest. I was arrested 2 years ago. They said that women in the District of Columbia that were poor could not get certain medical procedures, and that's because there were members of Congress, conservatives, that didn't like abortion, and they couldn't affect any other state, so they picked on the District of Columbia. And I said, no, wait a second. I sat in the street from the Senate, was arrested, went to trial, for the only time I've ever been arrested, went to trial, and they convicted me. They said even senators are not allowed to sit in the street and block traffic, so I was fined $100. But anything I can think of. If you guys come up with any great ideas, let me know. I'll do it. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, did you,
Yeah.
did you like tell your other friends in the Senate that about this statehood?
Yeah. We have 2 statehood bills in Congress right now, and we have co-sponsors. Now, co-sponsor is somebody that stands up for the legislation and is not only willing to vote for it, but willing to push for it. And in the House of Representatives, we have 51 co-sponsors, and in the Senate, we have 10. And in fact, just recently, at the dedication of a statue to Frederick Douglass, you guys all know Frederick Douglass, they put a statue of him in the Capitol. For the first time, the district, every state has 2 statues, but the district has none. And we finally got 1 statue, and that's Frederick Douglass. And the leader of the Senate, Harry Reid, who's the senator from Nevada and leads the Senate, stood up and gave a speech about statehood and said that he would be a sponsor of the statehood legislation. So yeah, we talked to everybody we could talk to. What's your second question? All right. Yes, sir.
At the beginning of this conversation, you said if at least a become state, we would get money. Do you know who that money would kind of go towards? Who would be responsible for where or how we divide the money up?
Well, the money would come into the general fund and be used, and the city council would decide who gets the money. But the reason you would get the money is because in every state in America, if you work in that state and live in another state, you have to pay some taxes to that state. So if you live in Pennsylvania, if you live in New Jersey, like my wife did, when you work in Philadelphia, she had to pay a tax to Philadelphia. Now she gets to take that off her New Jersey taxes. So it doesn't cost taxpayers any money. But it would cost Maryland and Virginia some money, because 70% of the people that work in the District of Columbia are from Maryland and Virginia, and they pay no taxes. So that means if you live in the District of Columbia, your taxes, your parents' taxes, go not only to pay for us, but they pay for people in Maryland and Virginia to fix the streets, to build a baseball stadium, to pay for everything, all the services they use. So 30% of us pay for everything in the district, instead of all the people that work here paying for it. Yes, sir.
If we have a representative in Congress, why would still be taxed? Taxation of representation.
Well, that's a good question. There are some people that think we shouldn't get taxed. But the other territories don't pay federal taxes. So Puerto Rico, for example, if you lived in Puerto Rico, you would have all the same benefits of citizenship that you have in the District of Columbia, but you wouldn't have to pay federal taxes. And on top of that, you would have control of your own local jurisdiction. In the district, we have no control. Our budget is up to Congress to approve. Our law, our legal system, if you get convicted of a crime, in the District of Columbia, you could get sent to California to prison. And what sense does that make if you're trying to rehabilitate people? You're going to separate them from their families, from their hometown, from the people they know, send them all the way across the country. We have no control over our local laws, our local, they're all subjected to the will of Congress. And in fact, most recently, a congressman from Michigan has decided that we shouldn't have red light cameras or speed cameras in the district. I guess he got a speeding ticket. He doesn't like it. So he's proposed a law that we shouldn't have speed cameras. We can't do that in Michigan, but he can do it here. It's crazy. It's crazy. Yes, sir.
So do you ever team up with Eleanor Holmes about different subjects that happen in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah. Eleanor Holmes is the, what, I don't know what we would call her, the big mama jamma. She runs the show. You know, she really is. She has power. She has an office in Congress. She has a staff. She's called her delegate. But she doesn't have a vote.
Right.
Again, so we all work with Eleanor Holmes going, yes. She calls the shots. She really is the power.
So other than DC becoming a state, what other things do you think DC could like change with like like benefits with DC?
Well, you become equal, and it's the only way to be equal. You'd be equal with every other state. You have 2 senators. Look, you know what senators do? They spend a lot of time getting money for their state. There was a guy from West Virginia named Bobby Byrd, and he was a senator. He was one of the longest standing members of the Senate. And for every dollar that the people of West Virginia paid in federal taxes, they got $2.50 back from the federal government, because that's what he did. He made sure that they got jobs. He made sure that they got money. But I can't do that for you, because I got nothing to trade. Nobody comes to me and says, Mike, I need your vote on something, because I can't vote. So they don't want to vote for me because I can't vote for them. So that would be the major benefit. And your voice would be heard. You know, you could be sent off to war. When I was 18 years old, I had to register for the draft, right in the middle of the Vietnam War. I could have been sent off to war, and my parents wouldn't have had any say in it, because they didn't have a representative who could have stood up for me and said yes or no, or, you know. Every other parent in America had somebody represent them, every other kid. Yeah.
What are the cons of becoming a state?
I'm sorry?
What are the cons of becoming a state?
Well, there are people that say, you know, we would have to take back our prison system. We don't have a prison in the district, and our legal system. And that would cost $800 million, approximately. That's the estimate. So we'd have to pay for that, and that would have to come out of the $2 billion. But we still have $1.2 billion left over. There's very little downside for us to becoming a state. Yes, ma'am.
Do you ever feel like being a president of the United States, or you can't even do that situation?
No, you know, that's an interesting question. I guess I could run, I guess you could run for president as, you know, because any American citizen, any American born, you have to be born, we all know that, right? Because this idiot Donald Trump thinks that Hawaii is not a state, so that President Obama was born, I don't know, on the moon or something. But you have to be born in this country to be president, but you have to be a certain age, I think it's 35, and there's some other qualifications. So I guess I would qualify, but I have no power base, and I have no experience, you know? You don't think people would stand up and say, well, he was the shadow senator, he doesn't have any legislative experience, you know? Obama was actually a senator in Illinois, you know, and he was a member of the Senate. So it will be an uphill battle. Yes.
So I need to talk about Puerto Rico. Do you think Puerto Rico should become part of the United States? Like, they are talking to become a state.
Yeah, they're citizens and have been citizens for almost 100 years. And I think if that's what they want, yes, that's what you have. But there's they voted for the first time in the last election, 61% to pursue statehood. So this is a new course for them. So we'll see how it goes. And if they become a state, they get 5 congressmen because the amount of people you have in Congress is based on your population.
If it was become a state, do you think they would expand the radius of DC?
No. This is the basis on which we try to become a state, okay? We have the Constitution of the United States. This is why we're in the trouble that we're in now. The Constitution of the United States says to have exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over a district not to exceed 10 miles square, which may, by the secession of particular states, become the seat of government of the United States, which means that Congress can make any law it wants in the District of Columbia. And the District of Columbia cannot be more than 10 miles square. But it can be as small, the capital, but it can be as small as one. So that's what the idea of statehood for the district would be. We would take all the government buildings, the mall, the Smithsonian, the White House, the Capitol, and that would remain the nation's capital. And then all the surrounding area, places where you and I live, Adams Morgan, American University Park where I live, Anacostia, that would all become the state of New Columbia. And that's what it's all based on, the fact that we can shrink the size of the nation's capital, but we can't make it any bigger. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, just talking about, you feel that you say nothing about activity, if you have to become a state, can you change the law about judicial decision?
Yes, we can within inside the bounds of the Constitution. You cannot make a law that violates a federal law. So, the 14th Amendment to the Constitution gives you equal protection. We can't make a law in the District of Columbia that in any way violates that. So, within the parameters of what states can do to make their own laws, yes. For example, in the Trayvon Martin case, again, they have a carry law, and they have a law in Florida, very conservative state, that says stand your ground. You're allowed to stand your ground. In the District of Columbia, and in most other states, there's a law that says reasonable force. I'm not allowed to use force against you, deadly force against you, unless it's reasonable to think that you're going to use deadly force against me. So if you come after me with a knife and I have a gun, I can shoot you. But if you come after me and slap me upside the head and I pull out a gun and shoot you, in the District of Columbia, you'll go to jail after that. You can't use unreasonable force. Yeah.
And if DC was a state, why are you in Columbia? Why is this going to stay in DC?
Because you have to have a nation's capital. So the name's already taken, basically. The District of Columbia is the nation's capital. So when we shrink the nation's capital, that will still be the District of Columbia. But so we needed a new state, and we had a constitutional convention. There are certain rules to becoming a state. One is that you have to have an adequate population, and I think that's 35,000 people. Well, we have way more than 35,000 people. You have to have a constitutional form of government. You have to have a Republican form of government. And by Republican, I don't mean the Republican Party, but the concept of representative government. And so we have all these things, and we had a constitutional convention in the 1980s, and we decided at that convention that the name of the new state would be New Columbia.
You're saying how you protesting and you're not going to jail, but you never got.
Yeah, I went to jail for an hour.
Right.
It cured me though. I'm reformed.
What other type of acts of protesting did you do?
Well, we stood up one time, but they wouldn't let, this was a good one, they wouldn't let Eleanor Holmes Norton speak before her committee. Now this is just an insult. They never tell a member of Congress that they can't speak. And especially in front of their own committee, this was their own committee, and they wouldn't let her speak at the hearing. So a lot of us stood up with gags across their mouth as the hearing started. And the chairman of the hearing, a nasty Republican man, said, sit down. And we didn't sit down. And he said, you need to sit down or you're going to be evicted. And we didn't sit down. And of course the police came in and arrested us. But I was lucky enough to get this guy that looked like Shaquille O'Neal. You know, the guy next to me got a little woman cop about this big. I got this guy that was like 6'8", and he grabbed me by the arm. I'm like, oh my God, please don't let this man kill me. And they took us out in the hall. But the funny thing is, there were 13 of us, and they couldn't get enough paddy wagons to take us away, so they let us go. We heard it on the radio that guy said, no, all we have is one paddy wagon. And I'm like, so they took everybody's name and address and let us go. So in the end, I wasn't arrested. But I've done things like that. We stood outside of Bonner, the Speaker of the House Bonner's office one time when there was legislation that he wouldn't support. There were about 50 of us that went outside his house and just stood there with signs while he went to work and you know, done a lot of things like that. Yes.
When you say we protested, is it just people that support statehood, or do you have a certain?
Well, we have several organizations. One's called Stand Up for Democracy. One's called Statehood Yes We Can. One's called the DC Statehood Coalition. Another group that you guys may be familiar with is T.U.M.O. And these groups come together for things like this. We've had rallies in front of the White House. We've had rallies in front of Congress, in front of the Capitol. So, yeah, we try to pull in all the statehood supporters that we can and get them. Yes, sir.
Senator Brown, I just want to know from a youth standpoint, what's something that's really sort of unconventional that hasn't been done yet that a younger population such as these guys in front of you can do to push DC statehood forward?
Well, you know what? People are coming up with great ideas all the time, like interviewing people on your cell phone and putting it on the internet. That was the first time I've ever seen that done.
Wow.
So that's a great idea. And anything you can do to energize young people. And you know, I would give my cards to you guys, and if you think of ideas, call us.
Yes.
Because you probably know better than I do. But let me give you an idea of some unconventional things that have done that have worked.
Yes.
Stevie Wonder wanted to, well, actually a group of people wanted to make Martin Luther King's birthday a holiday. And this is probably before any of you were born. And look, a lot of states said no. National holidays are a big deal, you know. We don't even, when I was a kid, we had one for Abraham Lincoln and for George Washington. Now we don't anymore. We slammed them together and we call it President's Day. But they're a big deal, and a lot of people would not sign on to the idea of making Dr. King's birthday a holiday. So Stevie Wonder wrote a song, and I know y'all have heard it. You know, Happy Birthday to You, Dr. King. You've heard this song he's done. And he got 70,000 people to show up on the lawn of the Capitol, and they played that song, and they all sang that song. And next thing you know, bingo, bango, we have Martin Luther King Day.
Wow.
So, you know, anything you can think to draw people in, and we've even tried things with music.
Yes.
You know, Chuck Brown used to be a guy that would come to all our events and would play he was a hometown wonder. You know, we all loved him. Old people, young people, white people, black people. And he was DC. You know, born here, raised here. As many of you probably know, he went to prison at Lorton and changed his life. Music changed his life. Some guy gave him a beat up old guitar, and the next thing you know, this guy created a whole genre of music, which still goes on today. Yeah, and so we would use Chuck wherever we could. We have another beautiful young African American woman who's a great vocalist, and her name is Anaya Gregory, and she comes out to events. And Anaya is the youngest daughter of activist Dick Gregory, who you guys may know. He's been a civil rights activist for 50 years. And she comes out and plays music, and we're trying to attract young people because all we got is old people out there. And let me tell you something, I can't think of a civil rights movement ever in the history of America or any other country that wasn't brought about with the energy of young people. Young people are essential to this movement. You know, in the civil rights movement in the South in the 1960s, there was a group called SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. many of the people that got us home rule in the District of Columbia came out of SNCC. Marion Barrett, Eleanor Holmes Norton, our first delegate, Walter Fauntleroy, who was a right-hand man to Dr. King. All these guys came out of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And students and young people are really the energy of the movement. We need you. So I would say anything you can think of. We just marched in the Palisades Parade, and man, it was as hot as it was today. And some guy showed up in a panda suit, in a panda outfit with a big old styrofoam panda head, in a cape that was a flag, the DC flag, and a T-shirt that said "Support DC Statehood." So whatever you guys can, I was sure it was going to pass out before the parade was over. Yes, sir.
So I'm hoping that one of our individuals will volunteer to explain to Mr. Michael Brown a little more about hashtag 51 project that we're working on.
Yeah, what do you guys do?
Our hashtag 51 project is about the Washington Nationals number 51 and one of the city friends to represent DC Statehood. And we have a petition. And we would like to do to
Oh, I will absolutely sign the petition. Yeah, and that's a great idea. And we tried to buy the name of the stadium. We wanted to call it Taxation Without Representation Field, so that every time the Nationals played on national TV, you would see that Taxation Without Representation Field. It didn't happen though. We tried to buy RFK actually, but it didn't happen. We do have a Taxation Without Representation way though.
So, as you sign an application, will you also help us get the members of your team and the other partnerships and help spread and sign it off?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
Sure.
Yeah, oh yeah, we'll get a copy to Eleanor Holmes and ask her to sign. In fact, I think somebody was talking about a potential meeting with Senator Parker. And if you guys meet up with Senator Parker, we'll all go into Eleanor Holmes and Norton's office that day, and I'll ask her to sign.
Okay. At this time, I believe they're going to confirm at 3 p.m. Senator Parker may not be in on Friday, but they are scheduled to try to have us come.
To do it this Friday?
Yes.
All right. Well, I'm happy to come along with you, and I'll call Norton's office and say that we want to stop by and see if she'll sign the petition.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. Yeah, I think what you guys are doing is great. We really need the input of young people. This fight has gone on for 212 years. We've been fighting, I can't tell you, on every level. There's been court cases, there's been a constitutional amendment, there's been legislative solutions thought of. One of the most famous Supreme Court justices in the history of America, John Marshall, once heard a case that taxation without representation violated the Constitution. Unfortunately, he found for the district, against the District of Columbia, that taxation without representation is not a principle of American government. He said it was just a catchy slogan that the revolutionaries used to try to get people to sign on to their cause. So unfortunately, we didn't win that case. But we tried everything we can think of. And there's nothing that I wouldn't do for this cause. And we're just, we've tried. I've started a group called nationwide nonprofit called Teach Democracy DC, and we try to send information out to social studies teachers around America so they can teach about this. We say to them, look, you teach your kids about Selma, you teach your kids about Montgomery, but they can't go in and sit at Orange County, because that's been done and that battle's been won. But they can still come to Washington, D.C. and march up to the Capitol and demand the rights for the citizens of the District of Columbia. So we try to get them involved by saying to them, there are lessons to be learned here. There are lessons to be learned in fighting for democracy, for for the district. Yes, ma'am.
So, do they have like any like exhibits in the property? So like different individuals going on, they can see like exhibits of,
No, we don't, but that's a great idea if we could get one. I don't know how to go about getting one, but that's a very good idea. The latest thing we have is Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass statue is now in Statuary Hall, and I'm sure you guys have studied about Douglass, but Douglass was really, a lot of people say Frederick Douglass was the very first statehood advocate in the district. You know, he was a sheriff, he was a businessman. Of course, he was an advisor to President Lincoln during the Civil War. He was. Do you guys know that the slaves were first freed in the District of Columbia? This was the first place that slavery ended in America. We still celebrate it. It is our only holiday in the District of Columbia. You get off school for it. It's April 16th. It's Emancipation Day. And what Abraham Lincoln did was bought 3,100 slaves, paid the 3,100 slaves, and then set them all free. Yeah.
Saying that, and when they freed the slaves Washington D.C., then they also paid back the slave owners, like they had to have receipts on each slave.
Only in the district, but yes, they did. And you know, it's sad. There's a woman named Loretta Carter Haynes in the district, and she has all those records. She's a great historian. She has all those records. And if you were a middle-aged woman, they paid $50 for it. If you were a young black man, you got $500, something like that, $300. I mean, each and every slave was valued, and then, you know, yeah, and when you look at it, it's really kind of sad. I mean, how would you feel if somebody said, well, okay, we'll give you $20 for this guy? You know, it's like, but yeah, that's it's the only compensated emancipation in American history.
One more question.
Yes, sir.
What do you feel about Frederick Douglass statue being in this house?
Well, I think it's about time. We've been a part of America since America began. Do you know that a guy named Francis Scott Key, who was a member of the National Guard in the District of Columbia, was captured by the British, held on a boat in Baltimore Harbor, and wrote the national anthem? The guy that wrote Taps is from the District of Columbia. We have 38 Congressional Medal of Honor winners from the District of Columbia. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech was done here in the District of Columbia. Brown versus Board of Education was decided here in the District of Columbia. Every bit of American history has some connections in the District of Columbia. And there we were the only state, the only jurisdiction that didn't have two statues. So we built two statues. One was of Frederick Douglass, the other was Pierre L'Enfant, the man who designed the District of Columbia. Well, they only let us have one. So when we got the first one in, we're still working to get the second one in. But to finish the job, right?
I want to know how you feel about the riots in different places of the United States about the riots.
Well, I think that, you know, we've seen this frustration that boils over from people many times in the District of Columbia. In 1968, I was a teenager, and Washington, D.C., a neighborhood I lived in eventually, was almost burnt to the ground, Thomas Circle area, over the assassination of Dr. King. You know, it's never a good thing to see property destroyed or people get hurt, and that's usually what happens in riots. But surely I understand that people get frustrated. They get frustrated with the system. I never think it's a good thing to riot, because in America we have the right to protest. We have the right to stand up. We have the right to redress our grievances and address government. Yes, sir.
Do you think the system is corrupt?
Well, I mean, I don't know how you can live in the District of Columbia when you got a guy that stole $353,000 from the Little League. You got another guy named Michael Brown who just took $55,000 in bribes from the FBI. You've got the city council chairman resigning because he lied on federal application. Yeah, there's corruption in the system. There's corruption. But it's up to young people like you to rise up and demand that we get this out of the system. You know, one of my favorite things is term limits. People talk about term limits. Well, every elected official has a term limit. I have a 6-year term limit. Congressmen have 2-year term limits. If you don't like us, don't send us back. Don't keep sending us back and then talk about how we're stealing your money. We're stealing your money, say, you know what, we're going to give another guy a try. We're not going to re-elect you. But yeah, there's corruption in politics. Power can corrupt. But I got to tell you, there are a lot of noble people in politics that get into it to change the world. And they do. And you don't have to be elected to do that. You know, there's a little tiny man from Alabama named Martin Luther King who never got elected to anything. And I can't remember a person that changed the world more than this man changed the world. And he was never elected to anything. Yeah.
Do you feel like we can organize more African Americans than the other person?
No, I think he had a universal appeal because God was at the center of everything that Dr. King did. He did everything came from his heart, and that touched everybody. You know, he made life better for African Americans, but he reached out to the people in power, the people, the white people all across America, and his message was a message of love. It was a message of love. And you know, if you guys want to read, if you want to read something really, really moving, you need to read the speech that he gave the night before he was assassinated.
No way.
Where he said that he had been to the mountain, he had seen the promised land. This was a man that was connected to God. Let me tell you, if you ever doubt the existence of a higher power, read that speech. Yes.
Can I ask you to touch on the subject of the $1 million that's being allocated towards awareness in DC statehood?
Yeah, right now, there's legislation, hasn't been allocated yet, but there's legislation that would allocate $1.1 million for our fight for statehood. And it would be the first time they've ever put any money into this. I'm not paid, I do this as a volunteer. This would pay me for the first time. It would allow me to hire some staff for the first time. It would allow your other shadow senator and shadow representative to do the same. It would give $600,000 in lobbying money and money for a media campaign. And we need all this stuff because people don't know about our situation. You know, 80% of America poll thinks that we should be the same as everybody else. We should have the same rights. But 80% of them also believe that we already do have the same rights. Because if you live in Kansas or New Jersey or California, why wouldn't you think the people of the District of Columbia, the nation's capital, have the right to representation? You would feel that. And so part of our problem, we've got two problems. One is we've got to fire up people in the District of Columbia. And the other problem is we have to let America know that we're in this situation, and the world to know that we're in the situation that we're in. That's why I have an internet radio show. That's why I started Teach Democracy. To get the word out to America that, hey, man, we don't have the same rights as you. Yeah. So, and that money would be very important. Puerto Rico spends millions of dollars on its efforts to become a state, and we don't spend anything. We just think it's going to happen. You know? I often say, imagine this, Mr. Entrepreneur. Imagine if you were head of a company and they said to you, well, you need to change the way America has always done business. You need to change the Constitution. You need to change the attitude of everybody in a nation. How do you think we should do this? Would you say, let's get a couple volunteers working on that? No, you'd say, put some money into it, put some force behind it, get people moving, get people organized, and that's what we need to do. Yeah, exactly, exactly. But I often say the only people that get anything out of statehood are the people of the District 1. The politicians don't get anything out of it. The businesses don't get anything out of it. The only people that get out of it, something out of it, are you. So you need to stand up and demand it. You know, that's what my friend Frederick Douglass said. They quote him all the time. He said, "Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will."
Wow.
And that's as true today as it was in 1847 when he said it. Well, hey, thank you. Oh, thank you guys. Thank you for standing up for statehood. Thank you for doing the right thing. And we'll get this together, and I'll see you on Friday. I'll call the Norton's office, and if she's not there, we'll go in and we'll leave the petition for her to sign.
Awesome.
And you know, and let's go see Senator Carper. He's a great guy. I know him. I want to thank him because he's the guy that introduced, you guys should all know this before you see him. He's the man in the Senate that introduced the statehood legislation. So he's, you know, so we each need to thank him for standing up for the district, because Delaware really doesn't get anything out of this. We're the beneficiaries of this. So we need to thank him for his courage. And I thank you for your courage. Thank you, Dylan, so much.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And maybe one of you will be the first non-shadow senator. Okay? And then you have them vote. Right?
So,
and you
Keith.
can say, I remember this crazy guy that came and talked to our group and inspired us. But thanks. Thanks a lot. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you. We actually have one of our laptops set up, hoping that you could be the first to sign our petition.
Oh, yeah. How do I do it? Show me how to do it. You know, I usually have one of my kids with me so that I know what I'm doing.
You can sign up right here, sir.
Okay, we'll do it.